In my several years of being a rabbi, whether of a shul, whether involved in outreach, in kiruv, whether teaching high school, dealing with the parents, I've noticed that when people have troubles, people have hardships, when things go wrong in life, they search for different, especially Sephardim, different ways to get out of it, different segulahs. They go to the rabbis, please direct us. Just this past week I was talking to someone, this lady asking me for segulah for a specific area. I don't want to get involved. But she was asking me for segulah, what can I do, Rabbi? So I want to share with you tonight what I believe, strongly believe, is probably the greatest segulah you could find anywhere. And I'll prove it from the sources. This is not a segulah given by some so-called Kabbalists. This is a segulah, it's explicit in the Torah. And I think this is very fundamental for life. We might take this for granted, but it's worthwhile once in a while to try to analyze and what it is exactly what we're doing. I refer you to the Ten Commandments. You would think that the Ten Commandments, these are the biggies. If they made it as part of the 10, they're up there as the most important of the commandments. The Torah begins by the 10 commandments, saying the first commandment, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem, your God. The very first belief, the first commandment, to believe that there's one God, and only one God, and no other powers. Second commandment, Lo ta'aseh lecha pesel, v'chol tumona asher b'shamayim mima'al. Don't make for yourself any images. This is a commandment against idolatry. Two biggies. The third commandment, Torah says, Lo tisa Hashem Elokecha lashav. Don't swear in God's name in vain. We Jews don't swear. We're told that the name of God is very holy, and since first grade, we Jews are told not to swear. If a person has a court case, the judges say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? A Jew is not allowed to say, I swear. We say, I affirm. That's what you're supposed to say. I attest. Now, you get to the fourth commandment. The first three are all connected to God, pertaining to God Himself. Don't believe in other gods, idolatry, and don't swear in His name falsely, in vain. Those all have to do with God Himself, the ultimate holiness. You would think if the fourth one that comes in the list, that's right after the commandments of the basics of this religion, of believing in one God, you would think it should be something very big. Torah says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekadsho. You should remember the day of Shabbat to keep it holy. Sheshet yamim ta'avod, v'asita kol melachtecha. 6 days you work. You do all your business, Sunday to Friday. V'yom hashvi Shabbat la'Hashem Elokecha. The seventh day is the day that belongs to Hashem, your God. Lo ta'aseh kol melacha. Don't do any work. Ata ubincha, you, your son, your daughter, your servants. If you have a housekeeper, people living with you, that you own them. It's not talking about a regular housekeeper that we have these days, someone you own. V'amatcha, your maidservant, your animals even. If a person owns an animal, his cow, his donkey can't do work for him on Shabbat. V'gercha shebesharecha. And even the gerim, the converts. Now, here is the important line which I want to focus on. It's mentioned in 2 places in the Torah. Ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Because 6 days God created the world, the heavens and the earth. Et hayam ve'et kol asher bam, the seas, the oceans. Vayanach b'yom hashvi, and He rested on the 7th day. Al ken, therefore, barach Hashem et yom HaShabbat v'kashehu. God blessed the day of Shabbat, the 7th day, and He made it holy. Right here we're introduced with the concept of blessing and holiness. And the very 4th commandment right after the first three big ones, which relate and pertain to God Himself, is keeping the day of Shabbat. This is mentioned again in last week's Parsha, which we read, Parsha Kitisa. Very similar words. Beini uven bnei Yisrael ot hi le'olam. Between me and my children, the Jews, it's an eternal sign. It's a badge. Ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, because for 6 days God created the world. Ubayom hashvi'i shavat vaynafash, and on the seventh day He rested vaynafash, which will explain what vaynafash means. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh, a very big rabbi by the name of Rav Chaim ben Attar. He's very well known. You open up any of these Chumashim with the commentaries, you see the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. There are only 4 rabbis in history who got the title HaKadosh, the Holy One, next to their name, and he is one of them. He's a great Sephardic rabbi and commentator on the Torah. He's buried on Har HaZeitim, in the Mount of Olives, and the writings say about him that the Arabs tried in the past several hundred years to run over, bulldozer over his grave. Every time they tried to plow his grave, when the bulldozer got within 4 feet, 4 amot, 6 feet of his grave, it would flip over and the Arab driver would die on the spot. The Arabs learned very quickly to stay far away from his grave. This is a man you do not want to mess with. He is named by the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, the Holy One. Now, he asks a very important question. He says, if you analyze the words, it says that it's an eternal sign between me and my children. Ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem et hashamayim ve'aretz. Because 6 days God created the world. Now he asks, in Hebrew, when you want to say, in English even, when you say God created the world in 6 days, you don't say God created the world 6 days. You say God created the world in 6 days. There's an in there, right? In Hebrew, you should say, Ki besheshet yamim asa Hashem et hashamayim. In 6 days God created the world. We say this all the time. What does it mean, Ki sheshet yamim? Because 6 days God created the world. It should be in 6 days. It took Him 6 days to create it. Where is the bet? There's a bet missing in the Torah. We know that, every letter in the Torah, even the crowns that are in the Torah, when you open up the Sefer Torah on Shabbat, you take a look at it. Even the crowns are used for drashas, to expound, to learn halachot from Him. There's a bet missing. What is up with the fact that this bet is missing? In 6 days. It's not 6 days, it's in 6 days. Based on this, the Or HaChaim says an amazing yesod, an amazing concept, which is hard to believe. He says, you know what the Torah is telling us? That God created a 6-day world. What does it mean, a 6-day world? What does he mean exactly? 6-day world? The mashal, I think, would be as follows. You have your cell phone. A typical phone, back in the days where there used to be bars on them, now also you see the percentage of how much battery you have left. It used to be at a phone, it had 6 bars on it. You charge it, a fully charged phone has 6 bars. Or now it's 100% fully charged. You start using it, spread out through the day, it dwindles, it goes down from 6 bars, 5 bars, 4 bars, down to 1 bar. Or 100%, 80, 60. By the end of the day, you're down to 20, 15%. Now, every phone has a battery which has a specific lifespan. When it gets low, it flashes red, your battery is dying. Gets down to 15%, flashing red, you better charge it. You better get to an outlet and recharge your phone. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh writes that this world works the same way. There's a battery life. There's a 6-day work week. And this 6-day work week, every day starting from Sunday, you're using up 1 bar from the 6 bars. Sunday, you're down to 5 bars. Comes the end of Monday, down to 4 bars. Friday, you're already down to 1 bar. It gets to Friday afternoon, the lights are flashing. phone's about to die. The Or Chaim Kadosh writes, the reason why the Torah wrote Kisheshet Yamim, it doesn't say in 6 days, rather 6 days God created the world, is to tell us that this world that we live in, if not for the recharger, if not for Shabbat coming and rejuvenating and injecting energy into the other 6 days of the week, this world would cease to exist. If somehow there was no Shabbat 1 week, this world would go back to tohu vavohu, would go back to nothingness. Go back to gone. The minute, over. Life is over. That every day is being injected by the energy, the life source of this world is the day of Shabbat. This is the Shabbat Vainafash. You know what Vainafash means? Vainafash comes from the word nefesh. It's a spiritual energy. This is what the Torah means. Bayom HaShvi'i, Shabbat Vainafash. On the 7th day, he rested, Vainafash. Nafash is nefesh, is a spiritual energy. And that's why he writes, there's a guarantee that in every generation there will be one tzaddik keeping Shabbat perfectly because God wants the world to continue. Because it's only through the acceptance and the keeping of the day of Shabbat that this world continues to exist. The source of all existence is, and this planet is the day of Shabbat. That's what he writes. I think a lot of people don't know this. We know one point. Which day of the year was the Torah given on? Which day of the year was the 6th of Sivan, right? Which day of the week was that? It was on Shabbat. That year where the Torah was given, the most important day in the history of mankind, 2,448 years ago, when the Torah was given on Mount Sinai, it was the day of Shabbat. Now, was that a coincidence? Is there anything that's a coincidence in this world? No. God chose the holiest day of the week because the whole world, it only lasts, it only continues because of the Torah and because of Shabbat. These two, we'll see later on in the speech, have a very direct connection. The lifeline of a Jew is the day of Shabbat. This is the source of energy, and the Torah learning. These are the two biggies, the two greatest commandments, mitzvot that a person can keep, that a Jew can keep in his life, are these two. And God wanted the Torah to be associated with Shabbat. Torah given on Shabbat. What is a day of Shabbat for? Not for sleeping, getting your bagel at night. You know what a bagel is? Bagel means, back when I was in Shiva, someone who slept a 12-hour, from let's say 8:30, you went to sleep, 8:30 to 8:30, that's a bagel. You got a full 12 hours of sleep, right? So it's not necessarily Shabbat given, of course, a day of rest. But God really was trying to allude to us, it shouldn't just be a day of sleeping. That's not what God intended. Sleep is good. I'm not saying wake up early on Shabbat. Sleep in. Sleep till 8, 8:30, 9, right? But the point being that there should be some spiritual connection to the day of Shabbat. You guys are laughing at me, like 8:39, more like 11:12, Rabbi. Right? Some connection to Torah learning, because spirituality, Torah given on the day of Shabbat, it has to be connected to Torah learning. Now, this idea is alluded in a very famous song, whether you're Sephardi, you're Ashkenazi, you're Hasidish. If you walk into any shul Friday night, you hear the specific song. This song was written by a Sephardi rabbi in Tzfat by the name of Rav Shlomo Elkabetz. Rav Shlomo Elkabetz, a famous rabbi, he lived in Tzfat. And this song is none other than the Lecha Dodi. He wrote it not for the Hamonam, for the regular people. He wrote it for the Kabbalists in Tzfat. And anyone who goes to Tzfat knows that it's a very spooky, interesting place. And he wrote it for the Kabbalists. A lot of the Kabbalists gravitated towards that area. This is what he wrote this song for. These rabbis would go up Friday afternoon to the mountains before sunset, and they would sing this Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi, let's go, my friends, my beloved, Likrat Kala, to greet the bride. Who is the bride? Penei Shabbat Nekabela, coming to greet Shabbat, the queen, Shabbat Malkata. If you notice in the Lechadodi, if you take the first letter of every stanza, it spells out his name, Shlomo Halevi. The first stanza is with Shamor, next one is Likrat Shabbat, next one is Mikdash. It spells out Shlomo Halevi. He inscribed his name. This is the way they signed off on some of these songs, like the artists, they sign off at the bottom. This is how they sign off on their songs. Now, what does he say in this song, in the second stanza? He says as follows: Likrat Shabbat lechuven elcha. Again, this is a Kabbalist who had a tremendous understanding of what Shabbat is. To greet Shabbat lechuven elcha, let us go. I'm not sure how many people pay attention to this every Friday night. Kihi mekor habracha. This is the source of all blessing. You want to know what the source of all energy in the world? You want to know what sustains the world? You want to know what's the fountain of blessing? And all the blessings that are rooted in the 6 days of the world is the day of Shabbat. This is the charger. This is the generator. And it occurred to me, one of the parts of the prayers that both Sfardim and Ashkenazim say by Shachrit in the morning is after Tachanun, after Ashrei, we say Hayom Yom Rishon LeShabbat Kodesh, right? Hayom Yom Sheni LeShabbat Kodesh. We count every day. There's some reference to Shabbat. The simple understanding behind that is because it says Zachor et Yom HaShabbat LeKadsho, that you should remember Shabbat to keep it holy. There's a mitzvah doraita, it's a positive commandment, every day for a person to mention Shabbat, remind himself of Shabbat. You fulfill the positive commandment just from saying that paragraph. That's the simple understanding. You want to know what the deeper significance of that line is? Hayom Yom Rishon LeShabbat Kodesh. It's Hayom Yom Rishon LeShabbat Kodesh. If not for Shabbat Kodesh, Yom Rishon would not exist. Hayom Yom Sheni LeShabbat Kodesh. If not for Shabbat, Monday would not be here. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The deep significance of that paragraph is that each day is sustained and only lasts is because of the day of Shabbat injecting and infusing energy into that day. How did these Kabbalists know this concept? Is there a source behind this? Where in the Torah does it refer to this concept? So I think where they got it from is a very well-known paragraph which we say Friday night 3 times, and this paragraph is none other than Vayichul HaShamayim V'Aretz. Right? I'll read you this line, and I want to share with you a few of the deep meanings behind it. Listen to what the Torah writes. The very first parsha, where we say this Vayichulu, you should say it with another person, two people giving testimony. In this religion, testimony is only given by 2 witnesses. And the paragraph reads as follows: Vayichulu HaShamayim V'Aretz V'chotz V'am. That God completed the heavens and the earth on the 6th day. Vayichal Elohim Bayom Hashvi Melachto Shasa. Vayishpot Bayom Hashvi Melachto Shasa. God completed His work on the 7th day, and He rested on the 7th day from all His work that He did. Vayivarech Elohim et Yom Hashvi Vayqadeshoto. God blessed the 7th day, and He made it holy. Once again, the Torah tells us God blessed it and He made it holy. We keep seeing this concept over and over and over again. Because on this day God rested from all His work and all His creations. Now, it's interesting to note that, I'll ask you, how many hours are there in a 6-day week? Right before Shabbat kicks in. How many hours are there? To the math. Who's the math whiz here? It's 24 hours in the day and the 6 days. 144. Thank you. 144, right? It's 144 hours in the 6-day week. Now, if you're ever bored and you have nothing better to do and you're playing on your phone, one of these games, take a look and try to count the letters in Vayichul HaShamayim V'Aretz. You know how many letters there are in the Vayichul HaShamayim V'Aretz? There's exactly 144 letters. Is this a coincidence? I don't think so. I think God was trying to alluding to this concept, that the 144-hour work week, is being sustained through the energy, and the life source, the lifeline of the week is through the day of Shabbat. You want to know what is the cornerstone of this religion is based on? Is the day of Shabbat. You want to know what the very first mitzvah any Jew should keep? Is keeping Shabbat. This is it. This is where it's at. You want to know what the ultimate source of blessing in a person's life is the day of Shabbat. The Chavetz Chaim, based on this Veichol HaShamayim, he writes in his Sefer, and he would tell a lot of people, he would say, how foolish are people who wait till the last minute to bring in Shabbat, and right away, Motzei Shabbat, the very earliest minyan they catch to run off. You know, there's a tremendous Yetzer Hara. I mean, Friday afternoons are always crazy. That's in any house, no matter what time Shabbat starts, anything that could go wrong will go wrong. That is the rule on Friday afternoon. And it's very difficult to get ready for Shabbat earlier. Chavetz Chaim says that you have to understand, if God himself is writing, there's not some rabbi, some Kabbalist telling you that this is an important Segulah, a big blessing. God himself wrote in the Torah of ours that the day of blessing, the holy day is the day of Shabbat. Chavetz Chaim says, you want to bring blessing into your life? Add on to Shabbat. The more minutes of Shabbat you have, the more blessing you have in your life. He says, how foolish are people? They wait till the very last minute, then they accept Shabbat. The very first minyan, unfortunately, there's a certain shul, guys are telling me that it starts now, Arvit, super early. Usually all the shuls, they wait at least half hour, 35 minutes after sunset to daven Arvit. There's a certain shul that does it much earlier, 10-15 minutes. In my humble opinion, I mean, if most shuls are not doing it, I don't think it should be done, but that's for a different discussion. People running off. Motzei Shabbat have a tremendous desire that they want to cast this like chain off. I need to run off to my iPhone or myself or some other gadget, because without it, I'm dead. Even during a 45-minute speech, it happens all the time. Guys, mostly guys, the girls are much better, that they can't hold back from being on their cell phone that's a different speech, really, that people's addictions to their phones is out of control. It's become a generation that people are so distracted and they're totally unfocused, and it's scary what's going to be with the next generation of the kids growing up. But you already see the results. But the Chavetz Chaim says, you add on to Shabbat. You leave Shabbat later. You should wait for the last minyan on Motzei Shabbat. Now, I understand. Rabbi, we got plans Motzei Shabbat. We got places to go. We got things to do. I understand. But the idea being that the Chavetz Chaim says this is the ultimate source of blessing. You want more bracha to come into your life? Add on to the day of Shabbat. Don't be the first one to leave. In fact, there was a wild story. I forgot all the details. I don't have a chance to look it up. It's an incredible story back in the times of the Chavetz Chaim, where this couple, for many, many years, they were childless. And they went to different rabbis, different segulahs. Eventually, they were zoche, they merited to have a child. After many years of being married, they have this child. The child was born with a defect in his heart. And they went from rabbi, to doctor, trying to figure out what to do. The doctors all said that your child was born with a certain heart defect. This is going back in the 1920s in Europe, and in the city of Mir. And they said this heart defect is going to be, it's going to take a toll on your kid. The kid's not going to survive past more than a couple years. He's not going to live. The parents were heartbroken. The mother gets home, she starts crying hysterically. After so many years, finally blessed with a child and telling us that the boy is not going to survive more than a couple of years. The boy's health slowly was deteriorating. And the heart, having a defect in the heart, was taking a toll. Physically, it was getting weaker. They didn't know what to do. This is what the top doctor in Europe and the Mir told them, that your son's not going to survive. So they're going from rabbi to rabbi, crying their heart out. Rabbis don't know what to do, what to tell them. Someone mentions that, listen, the Chavetz Chaim is already older now, you should go visit the Chavetz Chaim. Chavetz Chaim died in 1933. He was well into his 90s. According to some opinions, he was even past 100. And they went to see him. They were told that the Chavetz Chaim is already older, he's not feeling well, he can't see them. The mother starts crying on the spot, and the attendant says, I'm sorry, this is what I was told. No, that he's not taking any visitors. So they had traveled from the Mir to Radin, where the Chavetz Chaim was, and it was heartbreaking for them. They didn't have cell phones back then, the form of communication. When to come back, when he's healthy. When they were leaving, the Chavetz Chaim's grandson comes out, and he had known this couple from the past because when he was in yeshiva in the Mir, he had stayed at their house. He felt a debt of gratitude to this couple. So he told them, oh, what's wrong? He saw that the mother was crying. He said, oh, we came to the Chavetz Chaim, our only child, after many years, is about to die. He says, I'll get you in. He goes to the Chavetz Chaim, and he convinces the attendant to let him in, and he talks to his grandfather, and he says, can you please see this couple? It's very urgent. I owe him a debt of gratitude. Chavetz Chaim says, no problem. They come inside, and the mother starts crying and saying the whole story. Oh, my child, my son, after many years, and now he's on the verge of dying. Chavetz Chaim says, I could suggest to you one Segulah that I suggested to many people. I know you guys are Shomer Shabbat, but make sure from now on you accept upon yourself that from the time the candle lighting comes, the table in your house is set by the candle lighting time, and you make sure that you don't pass that 18-minute mark. You light on time every week, and that your husband also accepts Shabbat at that point. Even though we know that men don't have to accept Shabbat at that point, men do have another, 15 minutes after candle lighting time. 18 minutes is already sunset. No one should get close to sunset doing any work. Within at least 3-4 minutes before sunset, one has to make sure by then for sure not to do any malacha, any showers, and everything has to be done way in advance, not to leave things for the last minute for sure. But he told this couple, if you accept upon yourself, this is the greatest Segulah. The wife and the husband on that spot, they accepted upon themselves that 18 minutes before, they're going to keep that every week. And they held on to that neder, bli neder that they made. The son's health, miraculously, within months, started getting better. They took him back to the doctor 6 months later. The doctor thought that they had brought, he said, this is not the same boy. It can't be the same boy. They thought they were playing a trick on him. It was a twin brother. They told him the same boy. He says, what did you do? What did you do with him? He says, we went to the elderly sage, the Chavetz Chaim. He told us to accept Shabbat. The doctor was just blown away. That son survived, and he became a healthy kid. And they kept his neder even to the end of their life. They moved to Tzfat later on in their life. And there's a story from Rav Simcha Kaplan, when he stayed at this couple's house in Tzfat later on, this is already in the 1970s, he was at their house when he noticed when the husband of this lady, of this child, would be leaving the house, the wife on Friday morning to go take care of business, she would keep on repeating to him, make sure you come back early for Shabbat, make sure you come back early for Shabbat. And this boy, Rav Simcha Kaplan, who later became Rav Simcha Kaplan, he didn't understand why the mother was going crazy, make sure you come back early for Shabbat. So the mother told the whole story, and to the end of their life, they kept that neder of taking Shabbat in early. That was the ultimate Segulah for the child's survival. Now, another interesting point. You find in the same paragraph, Vayichulu, the word Elokim is mentioned how many times? It's mentioned 3 times. Now, I ask you, in our Torah, we know that God has many different names, but there's 2 names that are mainly used. These are Amonai, which is Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is it represents mercy. Anytime you see the name Amonai, you know that's referring to some attribute of mercy. Elokim is a name of judgment. I would think that if you have a paragraph discussing the source of all blessing, the source of all kedusha, of holiness, and all the brachot in life, that the name Yud Kei Vav Kei should appear. Why is the name Elokim mentioned 3 times, not even just once, 3 times judgment? What's with the judgment? So the Chazal tell us that quote the Gemara in Shabbat. The Gemara says it's very important for a person to eat 3 seudas every Shabbat. The Gemara says whoever eats 3 seudas on Shabbat is saved from 3 calamities, 3 judgments. First one, the Gemara says, is a chevle Mashiach, the birth pangs of Mashiach. Before Mashiach comes, there is going to be a world war, and the Vilna Gaon has said from over 200, 300 years ago that this war will not be for too long. It will be a 45-second war, at least the main aspect, the main part of the killing. Back then they had no idea, before the time of nuclear weapons, what he's talking about. But it's not going to be a pretty sight. A person needs merits to survive that war. It's, a lot of people say it's not too far away. We already see a lot of the signs that the Mishnah Sota writes about the coming of Mashiach. A birth pangs of Mashiach. Number 2, the second calamity, Milchemet Gog uMagog. There's the war of Gog uMagog. That means preceding the war of Gog uMagog, there's birth pangs of Mashiach, and then comes the war of Gog uMagog. And the third is the Onshe Gehenna, the fires of Gehenna itself. This idea is an important idea. The point of eating 3 seudas on Shabbat is, the idea behind it is a matter of respecting Shabbat. We respect it and honor it through 3 seudas. Now, in my opinion, this is the easiest thing to do. All you have to do is eat. We Jews are very good at eating. So you just have to manage to wash and eat bread. You have to eat at least a kazait, or some opinions 56 grams, a kibitza of bread. To wash and eat 56 grams of bread for 3 seudas. Now, for Friday night, that's easy. You're starving. But Shabbat morning, by the time you get home, it depends. If you stuff yourself by Kiddush, you probably shouldn't do that. Halachically, you should eat a little bit by the Kiddush so that you could eat the Seudah, but ta'avon, with actual hunger a little bit. And the hardest one is Seudah Shlishi. Now it's a little easier. The winters is hard. Seudah Shlishi is the biggest test, is the hardest one. A person should be makbid, should try to eat the 3 Seudas on bread, all 3 of them. Although there are leniencies for Seudah Shlishi to have mezono, to have fruits, in my opinion, people should not rely on that. You should. How hard is it? Just wash your hands and eat half a pita, 3/4 of a pita. It's just a matter of eating. So you push yourself a little bit to eat. I'm going to diet. So you won't diet on Shabbat. One day you don't diet. People say you don't gain weight on Shabbat. That's a lie. You gain the weight, but either way, it's worth it. 3 calamities, right? So the 3 calamities you're saved from is the reason why it says Elokim, judgment in this paragraph is a reference to the 3 calamities. So all these things that I mentioned to you, perhaps they're not such chidushim. Maybe you've heard of them. I want to mention something else to you. Some of you might know. How many times... I'll take it back. There's a Mishnah in Megillah. Mishnah says, it talks about the different days and the Torah readings on different days. And the Mishnah says, what is the most important day of the year? The most important day of the year. What would you answer? Yom Kippur, right? Hands down, everyone agree? So, the Mishnah goes on to say, depending on the holiness, the Kedusha of the day, is how many people go up to the Sefer Torah. On a Monday and Thursday, how many people go up to the Torah? 3. On Rosh Chodesh and Chol HaMoed, how many people go up to the Sefer Torah? 4. On Yom Tov, how many people go up to the Torah? 5. How many do you have on Yom Kippur? 6. How many do you have on Shabbat? Says the Mishnah that Shabbat is at a much higher level than even Yom Kippur. What's the reason why everybody comes into the shuls, crams into the shuls for Yom Kippur, and on Shabbat, a lot of the shuls are emptier? What's the explanation? It's because been there, done that. Shabbat comes every week. Yom Kippur is once a year. That is the day of judgment, right? Everyone comes Yom Kippur. They don't realize, in terms of the holiness of the day, Shabbat is on a higher status, higher pedestal than even Yom Kippur. The punishment for someone who doesn't keep Shabbat is much more severe than even someone who eats on Yom Kippur or breaks Yom Kippur. People don't know this. Shabbat is on a different pedestal. It's on a different ballpark. And I'll read to you One of the great rabbis, the Aruch HaShulchan, he writes exactly this point, Kedushat Shabbat lemala mikol hakedushot. The holiness of Shabbat is above any matter of holiness that you could possibly think of. Ubirchata lemala mikol brachot. And the blessing that is connected to someone who keeps Shabbat is above the blessing of any other day or any other endeavor. He says, V'lachen, therefore, nitkadesha v'nitbarcha, therefore the day of Shabbat is blessed and it's made holy from the time of creation, as the pasuk we just read, Vayivarech Elohim et yom HaShabbat v'kachehu. And this is the source. He writes exactly what we're talking about. It's the makor. It's the source of this energy of blessing and all throughout for the entire week. And he goes on to say, therefore, you find the Shabbat appears in the Torah in 7 different parshiot. 7 different parshiot that God mentions keeping Shabbat. And he writes, it's B'shalach, Yitro, Mishpatim, Kitisa, V'yakel, Emor, and V'adchanan, to teach us that all the 7 days are tuluyim, are dependent on the day of Shabbat. And he says, this is the reason why you mention Shabbat every day in prayers. I saw this after, is to allude to this point that everything is contingent on the day of Shabbat. And then he goes on to say, Shabbat is the ultimate declaration of emunah in God, in one God. Someone who keeps Shabbat is declaring, I believe God runs the world. I believe God created it and He orchestrated the events and He runs the world. Someone who doesn't, he says, it's the opposite. It's very severe the way the Chazal, the Gemara views someone who unfortunately is not keeping Shabbat. And then he goes on to say that in the section of the man, he brings a proof to this idea. When the Jews went to collect the man, which was their source of food, and he told them not to go out on Shabbat. There were 2 people, Datan and Aviram, who went out on the day of Shabbat to collect. And when God comes to Moshe, He says the following words, Ad ana me'antem lishmor mitzvotai v'torotai. Until when are you going to deny to keep my Torah and my mitzvot? What Torah, what mitzvot? They only went to collect on Shabbat. They only desecrated one of the 613 commandments. Why does it say, until when are you going to desecrate, are you going to not keep my Torah and my mitzvot? The Chazal point out from there that apparently you want to know what sums up this religion, what sums up the Torah. Someone who keeps Shabbat is as if they're announcing that I'm keeping the entire Torah, and the opposite is also true. Just a few more minutes. I asked you how many times in the Torah we have 7 parshiot. Usually the mitzvot are mentioned once or twice. Most mitzvot of the 613 are mentioned once. Some of them, which are more important, they're mentioned twice. You have the 10 commandments, they're mentioned 2 different places in the Torah. How many times is keeping Shabbat, the Torah keeps Shabbat? How many times is it mentioned? Mentioned 12 times. 12 times it's mentioned. That means that God really cares about this. Right? 12 times. And even the building of the Mishkan, which was God's own house. We saw this week's Parsha today, last week's Parsha, the Parsha before. Building my house, right? Build me a Mishkan and I'll bring my Shekhinah. God always attaches that next to the section, a paragraph about Shabbat. To why? Rashi says that even this house of mine does not push off Shabbat. On Shabbat, you don't build even the holiest edifice. Even the Beit HaMikdash, which is God's house, you don't build on Shabbat. How much more so for people who go out to work? The day of Shabbat is not a day of work. It's a day of God. And, we all have issues and struggles and problems in life. I want to refer to you to one story that happened to me when the first year I was a rabbi in Long Island. There was a man who came to me. It was during the Torah reading, at least it was in between Aliyahs, when someone else went up. He came over to me and he said, Rabbi, do you think I should do a Shinui Shem for my daughter? Shinui Shem, he didn't know the Hebrew words. He said, we asked a certain rabbi, my daughter had a dream last night. And the rabbi, not last night, the previous few nights ago, and the rabbi said that you should change her name when you go up to the Torah on Shabbat. Now he was going to take the next Aliyah, and he wanted to know if he should change her name on the spot for his daughter. So I said, why do you want to change her name? we usually don't change names unless someone is on the verge of dying. If the doctors have given up hope, if someone, lo aleinu, has a horrible case of cancer, or it looks really bad, then we do a shinui shem. We change their name because there's a concept that if you change a name, you're changing a person's mazel, their fortune, right? But normally, you don't mess around with the name. If you change your name, you're changing a mazel. Perhaps the last person has a mazel to live 90 years. By changing it, now you could knock it down to 70 years. Who knows? We don't mess around with names. So I asked him what happened. He told me that she had a story. She had a dream. I said, what was the dream? Well, she had a dream that already occurred a couple times, and she's really, flipping out about it. A few weeks ago it happened, and then a week later, and then just last night it happened again. The rabbi, already from the first time he had told them to do a shinui shem, to change the name. I said, what's the dream? So she has a dream that her teeth fell out. So I controlled myself from laughing, right? Teeth falling out. Who cares? Of all dreams, you would think, someone shot me, someone, cut off my head with a knife, someone, like all the horrible dreams you could have, your teeth falling out. And the rabbi said, do a shinui shem, change your name. So I didn't want to answer him on the spot. I said, no, don't change the name yet because it's a big deal. I thought to myself, I'm new at the job. It's my first year as a rabbi. Let me look into it. I'll get back to you. I went that night. I did a little research. I remembered that the Gemara talks about the different dreams. I pulled out the Shulchan Aruch in this section on Shabbat about the different dreams I had recalled. I didn't really remember this. Shulchan Aruch writes like this. Listen to this. Yesh omin, there are those who say, Shein li ta'anot ta'anit chal b'Shabbat. You should not fast on the day of Shabbat. If you have a horrible dream Friday night, you do not fast. Normally, the Gemara says that if a person has a horrible dream, we fast. I would not recommend it these days. You should ask a rabbi. They'll tell you you should do hatavat chalom, which means you go after prayers. They sit 3 people and they nullify your dream. That's what you probably should do, and give some tzedakah. But if you ever have a bad dream, you should call a rabbi. We don't generally fast because we're much weaker these days. But the Gemara does say that fasting does eradicate any omens, signs of a bad dream. So some say if you have a bad dream Friday night, they should not fast on Shabbat. The day of Shabbat is holy. You got to eat. Unless you saw the dream 3 times. Now, she had seen this dream 3 times. Okay, I said, still nothing. V'yeshra, the others' opinions will say, Shebazman, these days we don't fast any fast for a bad dream on Shabbat because we don't know, we're not experts to know the meanings of dreams, what's good and what's bad. Then I saw this next part. And this is the part where it freaked me out. Va'olam omrim, and the world says, there's a Shulchan Aruch written over 450 years ago. Shinimtza b'sfarim kadmonim, that is found in the books of the earlier rabbis. Shashlosha chalamat mit'anim b'Shabbat, that for 3 dreams you fast even on day of Shabbat. These are 3 dreams that they're big ones. Ve'eluhen, I'm going to scare you a little bit tonight. These are they. Sefer Torah shenisraf, if you see in your dream a Sefer Torah that burns, that's a bad sign. Of all the dreams you could have, a Sefer Torah burning in a fire, bad sign. O Yom Kippurim b'shat ne'ilah, if you see yourself on Yom Kippur standing at the time of the ne'ilah, the most holiest prayer of the year, that's also a bad sign. Then the Shulchan Aruch writes a third thing. If he sees the walls of his house collapsing, or shinav shenaflo, or his teeth that fall out. When I saw this, my teeth were about to fall out. I started freaking out. Now, I did look at the Mishnah Berurah on this says that these days we don't fast at all for on Shabbat for these type of dreams. But Shulchan Aruch Lamasa says it. Teeth falling out. Whatever represents someone who's single, it's less severe because it has to do with one's children. I'll leave that out. I didn't know what to do. So I figured I'll call Rav Yaakov Hillel, the greatest Sephardi rabbi in my opinion right now, Kabbalist / Sephardi rabbi, is probably Rav Yaakov Hillel right now. And they had told me, I got his number, they had told me that he has times for people outside of Israel from 12 midnight till about 1, 2 in the morning. And there's a guy who wakes up early. I don't know when he sleeps. He sleeps a couple hours a day. He's one of the busiest men alive these days. I call at 4 o'clock New York time. It's New York at this point. I call. It was close to, it was 11 o'clock in Israel. Wife says he's not home yet. Call back later in Hebrew. And then I call back at 12 o'clock. Phone's busy. 12:15, 12:30. Finally, 12:45, close to 1. I feel like dumb calling so late, And he finally picks up the phone. And he speaks English. He learned in England. And I told them that, listen, someone from my shul had this dream. They wanted to do Shin Hashem. I said, no. So how many times did I have the dream? 3 times. Friday night, the 3rd time, and the teeth falling out. So he says, are they Shomer Shabbat? I said, yeah, Baruch Hashem, this family is Shomer Shabbat. They've grown a lot. They keep Shabbat. He says, okay, don't worry about it. Tell him that the dreams generally don't mean anything. And Shomer Mitzvah, Lo Yida Davar Raz, Shlomo Melech says, someone who keeps the mitzvot will see no evil. You'll be okay. Don't do a Shin Hashem. What hit me from this, and I told the guy, no, don't change the name. This rabbi, this so-called Kabbalist in New York, had a lot of issues with in my bunch of years there, and never saw eye to eye with him on anything. And what I took from the story, though, is that very first thing, and the thing that he focused on, he says, are they Shomer Shabbat? He says, if you're Shomer Shabbat, you don't have to worry. You have the ultimate blessing, you have the ultimate protection, the ultimate Segulah over anything. Even there's such a dream, which the Shulchan Aruch talks very strongly about. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You're Shomer Shabbat. You want a Segulah? Keep the Shabbat. And this is also the song that some of us sing. We sing Friday night and Shabbat morning, Ki Eshmera Shabbat, Kel Yishmereni. When I keep Shabbat, God keeps me. Ot hi le'ol me'ad beino beini. It's the eternal sign between me and God. Right? People think by you keeping Shabbat, you're keeping Shabbat. No, Shabbat is keeping you. You think you protecting Shabbat, but Shabbat is protecting you. The ultimate protection from all harm, from horrible things in life, is the protection of keeping Shabbat. I see we don't have time for this whole section I had with the Greeks and the 3 signs, the 3 oaths. Really, I'll cut it short. But the Greeks at the time where they had a problem. The Jews were Am Mefurad, and they were a nation Mefuzar and Furad. They were on their own. Even back then, the Greeks saw that these Jews are just doing their own thing. They don't mix in with the non-Jews. They don't. They have nothing to do with the Greeks. They sat down and they came up with the idea: how do we get the Jews to join in with us, become one with us? Not marry with us, and not be so makbid, so care so much about their religion. You know what they came up with? They came up with a decree to get rid of 3 mitzvot. What were these 3 mitzvot? Thank you. Shabbat, Brit Milah, and Rosh Chodesh. Right? Brit Milah defines on our bodies, it's a sign of that we're servants of Hashem. Right? That holiness, all the areas that are related to that is holiness. This is what we stand for. Not immorality, not like the non-Jews where everything is immorality. We have holiness. A sign on our bodies that we carry with us 24/7. You have the Rosh Chodesh. Why Rosh Chodesh? Rosh Chodesh is how they determine all the Yamim Tovim. All the Yom Tovs and all the holidays are determined through Rosh Chodesh. What is the day of Yom Tov? It's a day where a Jew takes off from his busy schedule, busy life, and reconnects with his Father in heaven, with the Creator. And of course, this Greek saw that they have Shabbat. These are the 3 oaths, the 3 signs that define the essence of a Jew. You want to know what it means to be a Jew? Is having these signs, specifically, the sign of Shabbat. That is the key, that is the defining essence of a Jew, is keeping Shabbat. And then the Greeks saw that. And they came up with an idea. If we get the Jews not to keep Shabbat, if we get the Jews not to do the other 2, then we're taking away their root, their foundation, their connection to their God. And automatically we have them. It's a done deal. And this is the decree that made. And our grandparents, our ancestors, they gave up their lives for Shabbat. And you look around the world now, how many people, unfortunately, of the Jews are not keeping Shabbat. They feel that it's a burden. They feel that it's chaining them down. They feel that they don't have freedom. They don't understand the tremendous blessing behind Shabbat. They don't understand the tremendous protection that Shabbat brings. They don't understand the ultimate Segulah in this religion is keeping Shabbat. People, you look at the families, the non-Jews, the psychologists are looking for different ways to disconnect the families with their gadgets, with their technological, toys, right? Because the families don't have family time anymore. You go ask any non-Jewish therapist and psychologist, they'll tell you that this technology is breaking apart families. We have a bracha. God knew of everything that would happen in history in the future generations. He saw that we would have this trouble, this test. He created one day where everything is shut down. Is there anything more beautiful than spending an entire day with your family with no technology? Is there anything more beautiful than that? You're forced to spend time with the family? Shabbat is a day of family time. The fathers don't have time during the week. The mothers don't have time. They're on their phones, whatever they're doing. They're busy at work and shopping. It's day of Shabbat. It's family time. You sit around the table. You schmooze. This is the only way you could have a healthy human being, healthy children growing up. It's not possible any other way. You look at the other families who don't keep Shabbat. Their families generally are dysfunctional. These are the kids, and you don't know how many parents come over to me and tell me that their kids, they're glued to their phones. They're glued to it. I can't even have a conversation with my child. I have to text him to have a conversation with him. He goes and locks himself in the room. That's the only way I have to WhatsApp him to have a conversation. And these are the people that are going to have normal marriages, be able to communicate with their spouses, that are glued to their phones. Tremendous bracha of having the day of Shabbat. I'll conclude with this last point. I know I'm over, but this is a very important point. I cut out the other parts. There's a halacha that if a non-Jew keeps Shabbat, he deserves a death penalty. Now, this is wild. I don't think until yesterday I was able to find out the pshat, the explanation behind this. What's the big deal? Who cares? Let him keep Shabbat. Some guy in China, he's keeping Shabbat. Does it bother me? Let him keep Shabbat. Chinese do a lot of weird things, so add it to the list. So now, I saw this midrash. The midrash writes as follows. No other commandment besides two is a goy chayav mitah. If a goy wears tzitzit, no problem. Goy wants to put on tefillin, no problem. Goy wants to keep Yom Tov, no problem. Anything else you want to do, no problem. We don't punish you. You keep Shabbat, an entire day of no desecrating any of the malachot, the acts of work, death penalty, we kill you. What is the explanation behind this? The Midrash writes, it says, Oved kochavim sheshamat Shabbat, a goy, before he converts and he keeps Shabbat, he's chayiv the death penalty. Why? Midrash says like this. It's compared, he says, Rav Chia bar Abba says, that if you have a mashal, a king and a queen, yoshvin o masichin, they're sitting and having a romantic, nice, intimate meal with each other. Just the king and the queen. And the king told all his attendants, no one's allowed in. I don't have so much time with my wife, this is my night with my wife. And they're talking to each other. Someone who barges in, he slams the door open, and he comes in, oh king, I have a very important question to ask you. What's the punishment of such a person? Death sentence. What do you think you are, to barge in without knocking, without giving permission, just to run inside and ask me a question? Death sentence. Says the Midrash, Kach HaShabbat hazo ben Yisrael ben HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Day of Shabbat is a special, intimate day between the Jews and between their God, between Hashem. Shenemar beini veben Yisrael. It's between me and the Jews. Oti le'olam. Eternal sign. Lifikach, therefore, kol oved kochavim shebao machnis atzma benehem. Any goy, any non-Jew who comes and he brings himself into this line of connection, into this intimate meal that we're having with our spouse, so to say, chayav mitah. My Rosh Yeshiva said, you think about this, it creates a different perspective of what Shabbat is. Shabbat is a time where the Jews are having that intimate meal with their father, with their husband, with their wife, whatever mashal you want to refer to. This is our connection. This is our bond. We don't know how holy Shabbat is. This midrash is just a little bit of appreciation. You have a goy in Zimbabwe or in some African jungle or in China who's keeping Shabbat. What does he have to do with me? What do I care? Let him keep Shabbat. Apparently, this connection is such a tremendous connection and such a bond that if a goy somewhere out there, even if I don't hear about it, keeps it, he's interrupting with this frequency, with this connection between us and God. For that, you deserve death penalty. You can't get involved. This is the king and the queen having a romantic, intimate meal. Day of Shabbat comes is the ultimate connection with Hashem. A little bit of an appreciation that Shabbat is such holiness. It's that meal. From the time of sunset to Motzei Shabbat, you're connected. You're connected with your God on the highest level. And a goy is chayv mitah. He deserves the death penalty. There's a second mitzvah, by the way, that the goy is chayv mitah for, and that's learning Torah. Goy is not allowed to learn Torah until he converts. You know what the connection here is? Once you go back again to this. Shabbat and Torah learning. The day the Torah was given is on Shabbat. Shabbat and Torah learning. These two define the essence of a Jew. This is the highest form of connecting to Hashem. One is Torah learning, what everyone did tonight for the past hour, 56 minutes. I'm sorry, I went over. You will never look back and regret this night. This will go back down in the books. It's 56 minutes of learning Torah, which every word is equivalent to 613 mitzvot. In a matter of 56 minutes, you just piled up several hundred thousands of mitzvot over tonight, without exaggeration, in one night. And the second is keeping Shabbat. You want to know what I suggest, recommend? Anyone who wants to go out there, tell all your friends and family members that people don't know. They're looking for segulas, for protections. They have problems. They have kids that are lo aleinu, family members that are sick. Accept upon yourself to keep Shabbat. That is the ultimate protection. That is the key, the energy, the lifeline of this world, the energy source of the weak. And this is what defines a Jew, the essence of a Jew. Hashem should help us that we should continuously keep increase in keeping Shabbat. And ultimately, as the Gemara says, if the Jews would keep 2 Shabbats, it will bring Mashiach to come. Now we understand why. Because this is the highest level of connection.